Hi, my name is Mykyta. This is SCS 499 Honors Seminar presentation. The topic of my presentation is mobile application development. In this presentation, I want to touch base on the mobile application development. I will talk about the different mobile applications that exist and do a little bit of comparison from the standpoint of a company or a small group of developers looking to build a mobile application. Just so you know, this is a very important choice that could lead to a company's failure or success in the mobile application industry. And I will talk about the fundamental differences of the mobile applications and their advantages and disadvantages. So, what is a mobile application? A mobile application is a piece of software developed for your smartphone or tablet. The software is essentially a tool designed to perform a specific task on your device. It tells your phone what to do and how to do it. So, why are mobile applications important? As of today, there are 33 million of Canadians who use mobile devices in their day-to-day lives. Many students like myself heavily rely on the mobile applications. I use them to order food, get an Uber taxi, use GPS, and so on. For any business, a mobile application is a good way to keep their customers engaged by making their service available to them anywhere at any time. They add credibility to their application and the businesses as a whole. A company with a well-designed mobile application conveys that they are more trustworthy and customer-oriented. By putting the application on the App Store alone, the businesses expose themselves to customer reviews, which can both indicate customer satisfaction and provide an insight to desired improvements. There are three types of mobile applications: web apps, native apps, and hybrid apps, also known as cross-platform apps. If you look at the images, it shows that the native applications deal with Android, iOS, and Windows platforms. The web application deals with CSS3, HTML5, and XML. The cross-platform applications are associated with PHP, Java, and JavaScript. Please note that the programming languages for hybrid applications are not limited to these three. Modern tools replace JavaScript with TypeScript, and PHP is no longer the most optimal solution for the back-end programming. But we will get into it a little later in the presentation. So, let's dig in and find out more information about these three types of the applications. Okay, so first one we will look at is web applications. Web applications are developed in standard web technologies, including HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. In some cases, Java, Python, PHP are used. As I've mentioned before, TypeScript has become a preference over JavaScript. These applications run inside of a standard web browser like Chrome, Safari, and Firefox. They are developed and hosted just like any web applications or website on the internet. The only difference is that they are designed to look good and function well on mobile devices. This essentially means that they are responsive and designed with a mobile-first approach. In mobile-first approach, the developers start with focusing on the mobile view, but also make the application available for desktops and laptops. Alright, so let's take a look at some of the advantages and disadvantages of developing a web application. Advantages. First, they're developed using just regular web standards like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. You don't need to learn any difficult languages like Java or Swift or anything like that. Any web developer can build a simple web application or mobile website. This also makes the application easy to host and maintain. Another advantage is that you can use any type of developer stack or web technology that you want to use. You can use a developer stack like me that consists of MongoDB, Express.js, Angular, and Node.js. Or you can also use any other developer stack out there. You don't have any limitation in that aspect. Web application is the cheapest option available. If you are not familiar with web development, Hiring a web developer is far cheaper than hiring, for example, a Swift programmer. Price also goes into this next advantage, which is that you can develop one app and have it working on all platforms. So, iOS, Android, Windows, and even BlackBerry. Your app is going to run on any mobile device that can run a browser, even your old school slider phone, as long as it has some sort of browser. It may not look very good, but it will run it. This option is of course a lot cheaper than native and cross-platform applications. It is also accessible to laptops and desktop PCs. That's it for advantages. Let's talk about the disadvantages. There's quite a few. The biggest one is that it needs a browser to run the application, and that means that the user has to go into a browser and type in the URL of that application. To be honest, that sounds like a very poor user experience. Web applications are usually much slower than native applications, because native applications are developed for the specific platform. They're optimized to run on that platform as smooth as possible. Web applications are less interactive and less intuitive. Buttons don't have the same type of interacting effect as a native app does. Web application cannot be uploaded to the App Store. You would need to turn it into a cross-platform app if you wanted to put it in an app store. Most web apps do not interact with the device features and utilities. There is no API for camera, GPS, or any other features that your mobile phone may have. That's it for mobile web applications. Let's move on to the next type. Native mobile applications. They are the most common type of mobile apps. When you search the App Store and you download an application, there's a high chance it's a native application. However, hybrid apps are growing in popularity, and this can be added to the App Store as well. But a native app is developed for a specific platform. An iOS application is coded in Swift, or sometimes in Objective-C. Same thing for Android app. It's written in Java or Kotlin. With that in mind, native apps have the best performance, and that is because they are developed for the specific platform. They all have their programming languages and software development kits. Native apps can be easily distributed into app stores and be approved very easily. Native apps are also much more intuitive and interactive. Things run much smoother, and they can also interact with the features or utilities on the mobile phones, whether it's a GPS, camera, or microphone. There is a substantial API that allows the application to work with almost any part of the hardware of the mobile device. Okay, let's move on to the disadvantages. There are some extreme cons about building a native application. So, 1. They're built for a single platform. If you develop an iOS app in Swift, it's only going to work on iOS devices. Similarly, if you develop an Android app in Kotlin or Java, it will only work for Android phones. To support both platforms, you would have to develop two separate applications, which requires much more work and finances. Native applications are programmed in much more complex programming languages like Java, Kotlin, and Swift, which are much harder than JavaScript, TypeScript, HTML, CSS, or even some backend and web stacks. With that in mind, hiring the developers for native languages would be very expensive. Due to the complexity of the languages and having to deal with two separate projects, maintenance becomes very hard because you have to deal with two projects at once, and the languages they use are far more complex. In my opinion, these are very serious disadvantages when it comes to developing a native mobile application. If you are a small business or a startup, some of the things make it risky or even impossible for native to be your first choice. Which is why we will talk about the cross-platform mobile applications, which are far more suitable for startups and small businesses. Lastly, we have the cross-platform mobile applications, also known as hybrid applications. Cross-platform application is basically a combination of a web application and a native application. It also uses HTML, CSS, and TypeScript or JavaScript sometimes, but it also runs inside of a web view or a container usually through a framework. In most cases, it can be perceived as a native application. There's actually quite a few advantages to building a cross-platform application. As I have mentioned before, they are developed on a standard web technology such as HTML, CSS, and TypeScript, so this makes them much easier to develop. Of course, there are many different frameworks like React Native, Angular and Ionic, Ionic that is built on top of Angular, but under that you just have basically TypeScript. They are also significantly cheaper than a native application. If you decide to hire a developer, hiring a cross-platform developer is much cheaper than hiring a native developer. Another significant advantage is that you only need a single application for all platforms. If you use a technology like Cordova, which is like a wrapper for cross-platform applications, you can use that same code piece, that same application for all platforms, for iOS, Android, and maybe even Windows Phone, although I'm not too sure about that one. So essentially, you have one piece of software to maintain, opposed to having multiple softwares to deal with. Since cross-platform applications run in a web view, we don't need a browser like we do with the web applications. Cross-platform apps can also be published on the app stores. There's really no way for a customer to even figure out that they have downloaded a cross-platform application and not a native application. They both can be downloaded from the App Store and installed in the exact same way. They also have access to device internal APIs, so they can access device features like the microphone, camera, location, and so on. A lot of that depends on the actual framework. There's actually many different frameworks available, which I will talk about a little later. Cross-platform applications are much easier and faster to develop than native applications, simply because you only need one piece of software that is compatible with multiple platforms. Moreover, cross-platform programming languages are much easier than those in native applications. As I have mentioned before, TypeScript is far simpler than Java, Kotlin, or Swift. So instead of having an iOS app, a Windows app, and an Android app, and having to maintain all three of these separately, you only need one piece of software to deal with. And that really makes things much easier. But hey, what about the disadvantages of cross-platform applications? So, 1. They can sometimes be slower than native applications. Native apps are known for having the best performance as they are optimized for the use on a specific platform. Meanwhile, cross-platform applications have some sort of middleman to go through, which can sometimes slow things down a little. They also lack platform-specific optimization. However, don't let this discourage you. These mobile frameworks are becoming more popular and thus getting better every day. Cross-platform applications are much cheaper than native applications, but still more expensive than web applications. The reason they are more expensive than the web applications is because you have the wrapper framework to work with and maintain. Those can be sometimes pretty hard to deal with because they are extensive. They provide you with flexibility with different features, and you have to be a very knowledgeable and proficient developer to know all of them. So frameworks are pretty extensive, and those require some time to get good at. There are very few situations where I would choose a web application over a cross-platform application. The only time I would choose a mobile web application over a cross-platform application would be only if the major focus was the laptops and desktops. But in that case, would that even be a mobile application? I don't think so. Also, these applications can sometimes have a little less of interactivity, for example with button presses and things like that. But as I have said before, the frameworks are progressing at a very high rate. So I strongly believe that issues like this will likely be alleviated very soon, maybe in a year if they haven't been already dealt with. So yeah. So on top of all of the good things I have said about the cross-platform mobile applications, there is a few more. It's evident that the cross-platform application is the optimal solution for most of the applications. unless you are a multi-billionaire gaming company that wants to develop a mobile game that cares so much about the performance. I mean, one of a few situations in which you care about the performance so much that you don't want to use any percentage of it is the game development. So that's the only time you would probably choose the native application. But as most of us will be working on a smaller to medium-sized businesses, or even if you work for a larger company, you will still likely end up using a cross-platform applications. But hey, they're not bad at all. As I have said before, there are many frameworks, SDKs, and other development tools that ease the development process and reduce the costs. Some frameworks like Xamarin achieve nearly the same performance as native applications. Speaking of Xamarin, it has recently been updated and the developers claim that it can achieve 98% of performance of the native applications. That's pretty good, isn't it? Also, in most cases, the UI and UX are nearly the same as those in native applications. I would like to add, in most cases, they are the exact same. There are many frameworks available for cross-platform application development. I will talk about 3 most popular frameworks. So, as you can see, I have a table in which I have compared the advantages and disadvantages of each framework. So, if we compare the language complexity, Xamarin uses C#, F#, and .NET. React uses JavaScript and Ionic uses TypeScript. It's evident that C# and F# are much more complex than JavaScript and TypeScript. Performance-wise, Xamarin is the best. It can achieve the highest performance, while JavaScript is the second and Ionic is on the last place. For UI and UX, Xamarin can achieve native UI. Ionic can also achieve a very good UI that is close to native, while React does not achieve as good of a UI. Maintenance cost is low for all 3 programming languages. All of the 3 frameworks are very interactive. They all can access most device features and utilities. Development speed is very fast for React and Ionic, while it's a little slower for Xamarin due to the language complexity. Ionic is known for having many libraries available to the developer, while React and Xamarin don't have as many. All of the 3 tools are open source. Xamarin is owned by Microsoft, React is owned by Facebook, and Ionic is owned by MIT license. So, what is the conclusion? Unless you own a rich company, likely a gaming industry, with highly experienced programmers, I would strongly recommend going with cross-platform applications. With the use of powerful frameworks, you can achieve up to 98% of native application performance. Using Ionic and Xamarin, you can achieve the UI of the native applications. We have concluded that cross-platform applications are much cheaper, easier to develop, and easier to maintain. We can conclude that cross-platform application is the most optimal solution. This is it for today. The presentation is over. Thank you for your attention. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section below or use Regina forum to ask me a question. I will always be happy to answer any questions you may have or provide you with any possible advice related to the mobile application development. Thank you.